morning in Vellora, after the truth has been revealed. The storm had passed. Not the kind that breaks windows or floods streets, but the one that lives inside a town for years, fed by silence and fear. Morning arrived gently in Vellora. Sunlight touched stone walls without urgency. Shop doors opened slowly. Footsteps echoed again, not hurried, not suspicious, just human. The city was breathing differently now. At the edge of the old bridge, Arman stood watching the river move beneath him. The water carried leaves, petals, fragments of yesterday. He had learned something from that river over the past weeks. Not everything needs to be held onto. Some truths are meant to flow forward. He adjusted the camera strap on his shoulder, still worn, still familiar, but lighter now. Not because the weight had changed, but because he had. Behind him, the sound of soft steps. Lina. She stopped beside him, resting her hands on the cool stone railing. Her journal was tucked under her arm, pages thicker now, filled again. Neither spoke at first. They had learned that silence didn't always mean absence. Sometimes, it meant peace. Vellora feels different, Lina said at last. Arman nodded. It always was, he replied. We just couldn't hear it. Across the river, children laughed. A baker swept flour from his doorstep. A woman opened a window that had been shut for years. Small things. But Vellora had always been built on small things. Lina turned toward Arman. People are asking what you'll do next. He smiled faintly. They think answers arrive fully formed. And do they? She asked. No, he said. They arrive like mornings. Quietly. One step at a time. She considered that. And this morning? She asked. Arman looked out at the water again, then back at her. This morning, he said, I stay. The wind passed between them, gentle, warm, familiar. Lina didn't smile right away. She simply exhaled. As if a question she hadn't dared ask had finally been answered. The bridge stood still. The river moved on. And for the first time since arriving in Vellora, neither of them felt the need to run. Late morning, Vellora town square and quiet side streets. Vellora did not announce change with bells. It revealed it in glances. In conversations that lingered longer than usual. In pauses that no longer felt awkward. In the way people stood a little closer, no longer afraid of what might be heard. By mid-morning, the town square had filled. Not with crowds. With life. A fruit seller joked with customers. Children traced chalk circles on stone. A musician tuned an old violin, unsure if he would play, yet hopeful enough to try. Lina walked through the square slowly, observing everything as if she were seeing it for the first time. Or perhaps, as if she were seeing it for the last time as a visitor. She stopped near the fountain where wind brushed water into soft ripples. She opened her journal, but did not write. Some moments, she had learned, did not need to be captured. They needed to be lived. Footsteps approached. Arman. He held 2 cups of tea, steam rising gently between them. He handed one to her without asking. She smiled. You remembered, she said. I always do, he replied. Just sometimes too late. They stood side by side, watching the square. For years, Lina said quietly, I thought love had to arrive loudly. With certainty. With promises. And now? Arman asked. She looked at him. Now I think love arrives when you stop running from the quiet. He considered that. I used to believe staying meant losing, he said. But leaving didn't save me either. The wind passed again, slow, warm, familiar. Lina closed her journal. What if, she said, almost afraid of the words, this place isn't just where our stories crossed? She paused. What if it's where they're meant to continue? Arman didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and removed a folded paper, aged, delicate. One of the first notes he had found in Vellora. He handed it to her. She read aloud. Some hearts do not pass through towns. They are asked to build within them. Lina's breath caught, not in shock, but recognition. Do you think, she asked softly, Vellora asks people to stay? Arman looked at her, not searching, not uncertain. Certain. I think, he said, Vellora only asks one thing. What? That if you choose to stay, you stay fully. The fountain continued to flow. The square continued to breathe. And in that stillness, a new idea took shape. Not a proposal. Not a promise. But the beginning of a future that no longer felt fragile. Afternoon, overlooking Vellora from the hillside path. By afternoon, the sun had climbed higher, warming stone and memory alike. Above the town, a narrow path curved along the hillside, a place locals walked when they needed perspective. From there, Vellora unfolded gently below. Rooftops, chimneys, winding streets, all part of a story that no longer felt distant. Arman and Lina walked in silence, not because words were missing, but because they were choosing the right ones. They reached the old lookout point where the wind moved freely, unblocked by walls or doubt. Lina stopped first. She turned, facing the town. I've lived out of suitcases, she said. Always arriving. Always leaving. Arman listened, hands resting at his sides. I thought movement meant freedom, she continued. But it was just another way of avoiding stillness. She turned to him. And stillness, she said softly, is where I finally hear myself. Arman nodded. I chased answers across mountains, he replied. I thought finding my brother meant going farther. He paused, then looked at Vellora below. But the truth waited for me to stop running. The wind brushed past them, stronger here, honest. Lina inhaled deeply. I don't want to leave, she said. Not as a question. As a truth. Arman met her gaze. Neither do I. They stood there, not reaching, not rushing. Just standing. We could build something here, Lina said carefully. Not escape. Not comfort. Life, Arman finished. She smiled. Yes. Life. Below them, the town bell rang once, not an announcement, not a warning. Just a sound that had always existed. Arman stepped closer, not to claim, but to choose. Then let's stay, he said. Not as visitors. Lina's eyes filled, not with tears, but relief. We stay, she repeated. And with those two words, the future shifted. Vellora was no longer a chapter. It was the story. Late afternoon, early evening, streets and homes of Vellora. Vellora had always been observant. Not in obvious ways. Not with questions or confrontation. But with glances that lingered a moment longer than usual. With smiles that appeared before words were spoken. When Arman and Lina walked back into town that afternoon, something felt settled. They didn't announce anything. They didn't need to. They walked side by side, not searching, not hesitant. Present. At the corner bakery, the elderly baker paused mid-motion as they passed. She watched them. Then smiled. At the fountain, children playing slowed their laughter, sensing, not understanding, but feeling something gentle had shifted. Even the wind seemed different. Less restless. More patient. At the tea house, the owner placed 2 cups on the table instead of 1, without being asked. Lina noticed. She looked at Arman, amused. Did we miss a conversation? She whispered. He smiled faintly. I think the town listens better than we do. As evening approached, lanterns were lit along the narrow streets, soft amber glows replacing daylight. A neighbor paused Lina near the steps. You'll stay, the woman said, not as a question. Lina hesitated, only a heartbeat. Yes, she answered. The woman nodded, satisfied, as if confirming what she already knew. Later, as bells rang to mark the hour, Arman stood near the old notice board in the square. Someone, no one knew who, had cleaned it. Fresh flowers rested beneath it. No message. No announcement. Just space. Space for what was coming. Lina joined him, following his gaze. They're preparing, she said quietly. For what? He asked. She smiled. For us. Above them, the first stars appeared, soft and certain. And Vellora, without ceremony, welcomed them home. Nightfall, overlooking Vellora from a quiet hill. The hill above Vellora had always been a place of listening. The wind moved gently there, never rushing, as if it respected the thoughts people brought with them. Arman and Lina stood side by side, looking down at the town glowing softly below, lanterns like scattered stars, streets breathing with calm. Neither spoke at first. They didn't need to fill the silence anymore. "I used to come here when I didn't know where I belonged," Arman said quietly. "I thought if I stood high enough, I'd see the answer." Lina turned toward him. "And did you?" He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No. I only learned how much I was missing." He reached into his coat, not nervously, not dramatically, just carefully. In his palm rested a simple ring. Silver. Unadorned. Honest. "I don't have a speech," he said. "I don't have promises I can't keep." He looked at her then, fully, openly. "But I know this. Every road made sense after you walked into it. Every storm quieted when you stayed." The wind lifted Lina's hair gently, like it was listening too. Arman lowered himself, not hurried, not grand, just sincere. "I don't want a perfect future," he said softly. "I want a real one. With you." He held the ring between them. "Lina, will you marry me?" For a moment, the world paused. The wind stilled. The town below seemed to hold its breath. Lina's eyes filled, not with surprise, but recognition. She knelt too, bringing them level. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and full. "Yes, Arman." He slipped the ring onto her finger as the wind returned. Warm, celebratory. Below them, a bell rang. Not planned. Not announced. But perfectly timed. And Vellora, glowing beneath the stars, smiled. Morning to afternoon, across Vellora. Morning arrived softly in Vellora. Not with urgency, not with noise, but with purpose. Sunlight spilled through open windows, touching wooden floors, folded fabrics, and hands already at work. The town had awakened early. At the florist's corner, flowers were laid out in quiet rows, white lilies, pale blues, soft greens. No one debated colors. Everyone seemed to know what belonged. Lina sat near the window of a small room above the tea house, her dress resting beside her, simple, flowing, unburdened by excess. A woman adjusted the fabric at her shoulder. "You look like yourself," she said kindly. "That's the idea," Lina replied, smiling. Across town, Arman stood near the old bridge, sleeves rolled, fastening small ribbons along the railings. Children passed him flowers, serious in their task. "Not crooked," one insisted. Arman laughed softly and fixed it. In the square, tables were set. Lanterns were tested. Bells were polished, not for noise, but for meaning. No one directed. No one announced roles. Everyone knew where they belonged. At midday, Arman and Lina crossed paths briefly in the street. They didn't stop. They didn't speak. They smiled. And that was enough. The wind moved through Vellora, carrying laughter, the scent of flowers, and something deeper, certainty. This was not a performance. It was a promise, being built by many hands. Late afternoon, open-air square of Vellora. Setting, late afternoon, open-air square of Vellora. Narration. The square fell silent, not because it was asked to, but because it wanted to. The wind slowed. Sunlight softened. And Vellora gathered, not as an audience, but as witnesses. Lina walked first. No music announced her. No doors opened dramatically. She stepped forward as she always had, calm, steady, present. Her dress moved lightly with the breeze, simple and unadorned, like the life she had learned to claim again. Arman waited beneath the old tree. He did not straighten. He did not shift. He only watched her approach, eyes filled not with disbelief, but recognition. This was not a dream. This was a choice. They met in the center of the square, where the stone was worn smooth by time and footsteps. An elder spoke, not from a script, but from memory. "These two have walked through silence," the elder said. "They have listened when the wind warned, and stayed when it asked them to." Lina reached for Arman's hand. He closed his fingers around hers. No vows were read. None were needed. They spoke simply. "I choose you," Lina said. "Every day," Arman replied. The wind moved through the tree above them, scattering petals across the stones. A bell rang once. Not to mark an ending, but a beginning. They turned to the people of Vellora, not to bow, but to thank. And the town smiled back. Because this love did not belong only to two hearts. It belonged to the journey that brought them here. Early morning, outskirts of Vellora overlooking the valley. Morning returned to Vellora without ceremony. No bells. No crowds. Only light. Mist drifted low across the valley, settling into the folds of the land like a familiar breath. Lina stood at the edge of the hill, wrapped in a shawl, watching the town below wake gently into itself. Footsteps approached behind her, not hurried, never hurried anymore. Arman joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. They did not speak at first. They had learned that silence could be shared. Below them, Vellora lived on. Shutters opened. A baker swept flour from a doorway. Children ran, laughing, chasing the same wind that had once carried secrets. Nothing looked different. And yet, everything was. Lina opened her sketchbook. Not to search. Not to escape. Only to remember. She drew the valley as it was now, steady, whole, real. Arman watched her, not as a protector, not as a guide, but as a companion. Side by side. Equal. The wind moved again, gentler than before. No warnings this time. No mysteries. Just motion. Just life. And somewhere between the rising sun and the quiet town below, the journey ended, not because there was nowhere left to go, but because they had arrived. Together. Love is not found by chasing the wind. It is found by standing still long enough to listen.